This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, a pretty rough day for emerging markets as we saw US-China trade worries push shares to their lowest since January. In fact, MSCI's main developing market index was down another 0.6% on the day. It has lost more than 8% so far over the last month. Now, on the continent, South Africa's JSE shrugging off concerns about the escalating trade dispute. Performance, of course, is still better due to the post-election relief rally. In Kenya, the NSE 20 tumbling today. Traders are saying investors are staying away from the equity market and moving into government bonds. Now, also coming up on the show today, Kenya is gearing up for its first batch of avocado exports to China. Saudi Arabia confirms drones have caused some damage to its oil pipelines. And this South African teenager has found a way to farm both fish and plants in a mutually beneficial cycle. Well, let's kick off the show here in Kenya, where the 5th edition of the China Trade Week is set to take place early in next month. Now, the event is a platform for Chinese manufacturing companies to partner with local and regional organizations in order to boost trading relations. Here's Ramanyang with the details.
Please give a warm welcome to Ms. Rachel.
The China Trade Week in Kenya will showcase more than 600 exhibitors in the capital, Nairobi. This event comes weeks after China's landmark Belt and Road Forum was held in Beijing.
We organized the first China Trade Week in the year of 2015, just after our President called Belt and Road Initiative. At the recently held second Belt and Road Forum in Beijing, which I attended, they have more than 120 BRI supporting the stage, agreed to create a new Silk Road based on the shared growing and the collaboration.
Strengthening relations between China and Kenya have led to multiple opportunities for both countries.
The Ministry of Industrialization accords maximum support to initiatives that help its vision of thriving to be a globally competitive and sustainable industrial enterprise and cooperative sector.
The relations that Kenya and China have had that have really helped us to be able to grow our industrialization and also to strengthen the ties between our two countries. The reference that was made earlier to the standard gauge railway being just one of a number of projects that have seen the two countries work together. As the umbrella body of the private sector in Kenya, we at KEPSA look forward to strengthening the relations between the two countries, and we have seen the growing mutual benefit even as the trade between our two countries has grown.
This year's edition of the China Trade Week will run from the 5th to the 12th of June. The exhibitions will focus on a broad variety of industries, including building and construction, consumer goods, information technology, and agriculture. Organizers say the event will not only boost trade, but will also offer an opportunity for local traders to network and learn from their Chinese counterparts. Ramanyang, CGTN.
Now, of course, Kenya and China are making huge strides in boosting economic and trade exchanges. Recently, President Uhuru Kenyatta signed a deal with China's Xi Jinping to export its Hass avocados to China. It is estimated that when the agreement is fully implemented, the Chinese market will take in more than 40% of Kenya's avocado produce, making it one of the largest importers of the fruit. Well, Kenya says it plans to export 13 other priority farm produce to China in the future. This, of course, is all part of an ambitious plan to grow its exports by 20% per year by 2022, of course, focusing on 6 areas, including tea, coffee, horticulture, tobacco, textiles, as well as apparel.
Of particular interest, of course, is avocado. And we've seen what the SPS agreement has done for avocado and the businesses in KEPSA that actually focus on that fruit. And so we look forward to, through this process, to opening up more industries that we would see the big growth that we have seen, particularly in agriculture.
Let's delve further into Kenya's export strategy in the short and long term. We're joined by Peter B. Watt. He is the CEO of the Export Promotion Council. You're very welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Uche.
Well, of course, as we mentioned, Kenya's plan, of course, is to grow exports by 20% each year. And that's from about $1.4 billion in 2017 to just over $10 billion by 2022. So looking at some of the recent numbers in terms of export earnings, exports to the EAC fell 2.5% last year, but we did see exports to the US under the AGOA plan rise about 25.8%. So give us a sense of what your take is on Kenya's export performance. Do you think it can achieve this goal of $10 billion by 2022?
Yes, it can achieve. As you are aware, we are currently working on improving on the manufacturing sector through the Big Four agenda, and the idea is to increase the number of products which are exportable, and also to increase the value as well as to expand the value. So looking at what you have just said, what is happening within EAC is that many Kenyan companies are actually investing in the EAC. So if you look at Uganda, for example, Kenyan companies' investments is the fourth largest after, of course, Uganda, China, and India. And as well as also when you look at the African Growth and Opportunity Act, the US, there's been a lot of activities, promotional activities and production towards the US market, which is of course the textile and apparel. But the bigger picture is that Kenya is seeking to bridge the gap to ensure that we achieve more exports, because this is the way that the country can actually grow in terms of achieving the most foreign exchange. And this is the model which even China has done. If you look at the Chinese economy, over the last 3 to 4 decades, they invested a lot in industrialization. They ensure that there is a lot of increased value addition as well as market access. And that is why China is one of the richest countries as we speak in terms of GDP in purchasing parity terms, which means Chinese are leading in terms of purchasing power. Yes.
But I mean, let's delve further into the specifics of what Kenya is doing to improve its export competitiveness globally. Of course, is it developing value addition in order to widen its offering in terms of export?
Yes, definitely. There is a lot of activities happening around export or investment incentives. We have the export processing zones, which are currently being expanded. Right. We also have the special economic zones, which is currently also being expanded. They are going to be opening up of various special economic zones, where we are looking at encouraging investors, both local and global, to invest and expand the Kenya basket of products. So it is a realistic target, and as a country, I think we are very much focused to see that Kenya taps into the African continent, because as you know, Kenya was the first country to ratify the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And I can tell you for a fact that Kenya is associated with breaking up what we call spaghetti bowl, because you see, Africa was constituting so many other regional economic blocks, and now as we move to Africa, one continent, we are looking at finding more markets for our manufactured products or value-added products. So we want to grow as a country, but grow with neighbors. So, and that is why we are looking at a strategy whereby we can be able to attract more investments to Kenya, because Kenya, when you invest in Kenya, you'll be able to access, the African continent, you'll be able to access the African growth and opportunity market in the US. Yes.
Well, one of the issues when we talk about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is the fact that there's a lot of barriers to entering these markets. There are a lot of things that are hampering export markets regionally and of course internationally as well. One of the things they're debating in Kenya right now is the fact that Kenya's shilling is overvalued against the US dollar, and that hampers food exports going forward. Do you think this could be one of the key setbacks when we talk about improving Kenya's export competitiveness?
I don't think so, because Kenya practices what we call flexible Our exchange rate is subject to market forces.
Right.
What we are just doing currently is to ensure that we increase production.
Right.
We increase the number of volumes in terms of quantities of exportable products and the kinds in terms of diversifying, and we'll be able to control our macroeconomic environment, because you realize that when we have more produce, then we can be able to check on inflation, and therefore the shilling will remain relatively stronger.
Right.
So I don't think it is an issue of evaluation, because the Kenya shilling is subject to market forces,
right.
of course. So what we are trying to fix to increase on the value is to ensure that production is actually enhanced, and that is why we are looking at special economic zones, new investments locally and globally, and also looking at our companies, whether they are in the financial sector or services, investing in other countries and increasing the amount of foreign income to our country.
Well, on that note then, what would you pinpoint as probably one of the biggest challenges the government still needs to work on? For example, people talk about the fact that there are not very many arrangements in place or in the pipeline to ease foreign currency exchange between traders between countries such as Kenya and China going forward. I
think which is not a challenge, it's an opportunity.
Right.
The opportunity that the government of Kenya has is to win more African countries to enter into the African Continental Free Trade Area, to win more Kenyans to support, and invest, and to win many countries to look at Kenya positively and encourage their investors to come to Kenya, and also open markets for Kenya so that we can export our products, we can export our services. So it's a big opportunity for the government, and I think Kenya is at a take-off stage because many countries are interested in doing business with Kenya. As you are aware, currently we have so many trade expos happening in Kenya. There's going to be a Kenya-China Trade Week.
Right.
Kenya is going to go to Hunan province of China in June, in the first China-Africa Economic Forum. And we are seeing a lot of business activity and interest in Kenya because of the manner in which we've been able, the government has been able to reach out to other economies so that we can grow together as one continent and as one world.
Right. So you seem quite optimistic when we talk about Kenya's export competitiveness going forward. What then would you say is your outlook, given the fact that in regions like East Africa, we are seeing bilateral agreements are experiencing, some issues. What then is your outlook?
Actually, that is a common occurrence when it comes to regional economic blocks. You will always see certain nationalistic tendencies, but I think the final bullet is the coming in of the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Right.
Nobody now is going to focus on looking at a small country like Kenya, a small country like Uganda, but looking at the whole continent and the opportunities that comes with widening the market to the whole continent. So it is about now moving with speed and capturing the moment and the opportunities so that we can be able to drive intra-Africa trade ahead, because that's how even we can tackle China. China is a whole continent.
Right.
So if Africa fixes their home by ensuring that we have that one market of 1.3 billion citizens, then we can be able to trade easily with other markets which have higher incomes than ourselves. Then we can be able to promote what we call macroeconomic convergence, because what we are doing here is when we sell more, when we do more business, then we catch up, because the GDP per capita of China is over $10,000.
Right.
Ours is about 2,000. So you see, it's like we are in a race. Kenya is well known for marathon, and the way marathon starts is you start slowly at the rear, but towards the end you speed it up and you win the race.
Well, many thanks for joining us in the studio, and thank you so much for your insights, Mr. Biwott. Of course, that was Peter Biwott. He is the CEO of the Export Promotion Council. Well, let's move on now. Tunisia Africa, the Tunisia Africa Business Council is an NGO set up by the private sector to promote the North African nation. Now, it also proposes policies to access African markets. For the first time, the NGO has released a study on Africa's most important ports, logistics and promising maritime commercial routes. Here's CGTN's Adnan Eshaushi with the details.
The African Center for Competitive Intelligence, stemming from the Tunisia Africa Business Council, TABC, conducted a study entitled Transport and Logistics Corridors in Africa, a Tunisian Perspective, aimed at making the African markets more accessible to Tunisian investors and decision makers.
This is an important study for Tunisian businessmen and enterprises to know the exact location of key African ports, the logistic flow per port, but especially to plan transporting containers from Rades port in Tunis to Abidjan, Dakar, Tema in Ghana, Cameroon, Gabon and other countries.
The TABC study includes all the economic and logistical data related to the international transport of 20 African countries to give decision makers clarity on multilateral cooperation relations and to the interested exporting operators a commercial expansion on the continent.
We valued the exact transportation costs for 20 to 40 feet containers from Rades port to the most important ports in Africa. From now on, a Tunisian businessman or enterprise will have access to all the necessary information to facilitate export of our goods and products.
The state is determined to consolidate its economic presence in Africa.
The future of business is in Africa. Tunisia believes that integrating the African market will boost the economy and growth. We welcome any initiative that will reinforce Tunisia's position in Africa.
The African Center for Competitive Intelligence has developed monographs of several African countries, maritime entry points in Africa, and the main ports and corridors of North Africa, West Africa, East Africa, and Southern Africa. The Tunisia Africa Business Council has specified that the first edition of the study, Transport and Logistics Corridors in Africa, a Tunisian perspective, also aims to attract the attention of international investors to the opportunity to position Tunisia as a logistical and industrial hub for Africa, Africa being a reservoir for global growth for the coming decades. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And now look at our corporate headlines today. State Power Utility Zimbabwe Electricity Transmission and Distribution Company has imposed the worst load shedding in 3 years. Households and industries, including mines, are expected to go without electricity for up to 8 hours daily. Now, this is bound to incite Zimbabweans against the government following the economic crisis, coupled with commodity shortages. And MTN Nigeria is set to debut on the Nigerian Stock Exchange come Thursday. The company successfully completed the registration of 20.3 billion shares with the Securities and Exchange Commission. MTN Nigeria CEO Ferdi Mulman describes the development as a milestone in the company's listing process. And the Microsoft Corporation is set to invest $100 million to open an Africa Technology Development Center. The hub will feature sites in Kenya and Nigeria over the next 5 years. The company will also hire over 100 local engineers to work in the new Africa facility in both countries. And lastly, shares of German automaker Volkswagen have risen following its announcement on listing its Traton trucks unit. Now, the company expects a revenue increase of up to 5% and an operating return on sales between 6.5% and 7.5%. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we're heading into a short break now. Here's a look at what's still to come. Global messaging service WhatsApp is hit by a major cybersecurity breach. And we look at a new tourism law that is worrying people registered on home sharing apps like Airbnb in South Africa.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Uche Okoronkwo. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN. Welcome back to Global Business Africa. Now, global messaging service WhatsApp has admitted to a major cybersecurity breach that has now enabled targeted spyware to be installed on phones through voice calls. The security vulnerability affects both iPhone and Android devices. It enables malicious code to be inserted into data packets sent during the process of starting a voice call. When the data is received, WhatsApp's internal buffer is forced to overflow, overwriting other parts of the app's memory, and then control is eventually given over to the application. Well, WhatsApp is Facebook's flagship messaging application and is lauded for its end-to-end encryption, both for messaging and voice calls. As a result, it has become a standard communications platform for government and security officials in many countries around the world. Well, let's get more on the security breach and, of course, its implications from Felix Atandi. He's the head of cybersecurity at Vigilant Systems. Very welcome to the show, Felix.
Thank you.
Now, we've seen a series of such cyber attacks recently, in recent years, where, of course, consumers' personal data is basically compromised. Give us a sense of how serious this latest hacking at WhatsApp is.
Considering WhatsApp is a company belonging to Facebook, Facebook itself has already had a couple of major data breaches. Last year, it had 30 million of their users' data leaked online around media. And early this year as well, they leaked also 500 million user accounts. Well, not they really, but a company that they were using as a conduit to upload their data to their servers. The WhatsApp one is quite unique for the reason that the way it's spread into your computer, you will never know. It doesn't require a human input. Someone just gives you a call, and immediately the call connects to your mobile phone. The spyware is automatically installed without you knowing. And that's why, and it affects also almost 1.5 billion users who belong to WhatsApp.
Right. Yeah. And compared to some of these other cyber attack cases we've seen recently, how, on a scale of 1 to 10, how serious is this one? How scary is it?
The way we measure severity for vulnerabilities is how possible is it to be taken advantage of.
Right.
And for this specific one, it's on the region of 7 to 8.
Right.
Which on the scale for severity is really high because of the way it gets into your phone or computer.
Now, of course, the tech details are complicated for a layman like me, but give us a sense of whether consumers should be worried or wary of using WhatsApp going forward.
WhatsApp for this specific purpose was just used as a conduit or as a window to let the spyware get into your phone. As I explained earlier, somebody just calls you, your WhatsApp number, and automatically the spyware is installed. Now, the spyware now takes control of the operating system of the phone. So regardless of any other service use or any other application, it's now able to send back all your emails, all your messaging data. It can turn on your microphone, it can turn on your camera. So as long as it's in your phone, then it can just send any data to anybody or the person who hacks you.
Now, I don't know if these details are out yet, but how can consumers know whether they were victims of this?
From the message I've seen from the WhatsApp group, they indicated that just a few people have been affected by this. They say a handful, so I'd like to imagine maybe 50 of them. Because of the nature of this attack, it's a targeted attack. It's not broadcast. You really have to want something from somebody. So either it's a state agency or an intelligence agency that was going after the people that they went after.
Yeah. Now, of course, this recent event, it feeds into a debate that has been going on around big tech companies and such as Facebook, Apple, Google, and their protection of users' privacy. What are your thoughts on the solutions that can ensure that this doesn't happen in the near future? Is it better regulation? What are your thoughts on that?
It goes both ways. On the tech giants' part, they have an obligation to take care of personal user data. And on the other hand, governments have an obligation as well to pass legislation that is able to monitor the big companies or any other company that is looking after your data. So for example, in Europe, they have the GDPR law, there is no data protection regulation. In the United States, there's not really a federal law, but each state also has its own law that covers how data is stored. In Kenya, we're still yet to get there, and from what I've seen previously, we have a data protection bill that is almost being tabled. Right. It's already passed cabinet approval, so the other process should be quicker, considering the NIMS process in Kenya for the Huduma number.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of discussion going on around the Huduma number and customers' data protection. So give us a sense of how then you expect this discussion around data protection, privacy, security to evolve in the coming years.
Apart from having regulations or laws for specific countries, say for example in Kenya, it goes a long way because it gives a framework on how to collect data, process data, and also store the data. As I explained before, other jurisdictions, especially in Europe and America, already have this in place. There's also a breach notification. When a company or a big corporation like Google or WhatsApp is breached, they have an obligation to tell the people that they've been breached and the government as well that they've been breached before anybody else finds out. In Kenya, we also have processes that go about that. We have the Kenya Cyber Incidents and Response Team. So if your company or if any other bank is hacked or the data is breached, they have an obligation to report to that company, as well as the Central Bank of Kenya has a guidance note for 2018. The latest one is 2018 August, so such that any other company that deals with money and people's data or personally identifiable information, if they're breached, there's a process on how they're supposed to go around with that.
Right.
Well, going forward as well, for the technology part, companies also are investing in technologies to keep the data secure. So encryption, the algorithms are getting more and more complex, so that they give the hackers a hard time.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us in the studio. Thank you so much for your insights into this discussion. Of course, that was Felix Atandi. He's the head of cyber security at Vigilant Systems. Well, let's shift focus now. Airbnb and other home sharing apps are coming under scrutiny in South Africa. The country has now proposed legislation to regulate short-term holiday home rentals, but the new laws are being challenged by an organization called Sakeliga. Now, just about anyone who owns a home anywhere in the world can be a service provider to Airbnb, but South Africa says it is causing harm to small businesses, especially in the tourism sector. Here's CGTN's Julie Shire with more.
Airbnb could soon face a stricter set of laws in South Africa which could dictate locations and place limits on homestays. The app allows people to list and rent their premises to travellers without much hassle or cost.
We want more and more of these platforms. We do believe that they bring us a lot of traffic. There's got to be a limit to how many times per year you will be able to host. Should you want to host 365 days in a year, there's nothing wrong with it. Just go and zone correctly and zone as a business.
Business lobby group Sake Liga is opposing the new laws. It says restrictions will be damaging to tourism and the economy. The online platform has raked in $678 million for the local economy and created 22,000 jobs.
Airbnb is a model of self-regulation, and customers seem to love it. They like the insights and they like the information they get from using the platform, and I think we should be encouraging rather than discouraging this sort of market innovation.
Homes listed on Airbnb generally provide a cheaper and more personal experience for travellers away from fancy hotels and guest houses. But smaller businesses who have to be graded say it's pricing them out of the market.
People are using their back room to accommodate guests, and they are cheap. You know, my rates are very competitive. But if someone look at my rates and look at the back room, which is the same standard as me, but it's not regulated, you know, the person will go there.
Airbnb has over 35,000 listings in South Africa. It's in discussion with government over the proposed new legislation. While some believe it will level the playing fields, the laws will have to go through Parliament before being passed. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And elsewhere in South Africa, a nano-satellite built by students is set to be commercialized in an attempt to combat illegal maritime activities. Now, the miniaturized satellite was designed and built by engineering students at Cape Town's University of Technology. It will monitor natural disasters like runaway fires in real time, 24 hours a day from space. CGTN's Travis Andrews has their report.
It's been a great few months for the ZA-Cube-2 team. Not only is their nano-satellite successfully orbiting the Earth, but it's also sending back invaluable data for the students to process. The miniaturized CubeSat has, since its launch, rounded the Earth's atmosphere every 92 minutes and sent back images of runaway fires, which are being picked up by its thermal imaging payload. And the advantages of having an eye in the sky has proven to be of great use.
So what Z2 was all about was to demonstrate the technology, because currently there wasn't, for South Africa, we don't really have satellites up in space, and just to show the government and the industry that we can do this locally. We do not have to buy the expensive data from other companies, international companies.
Now, between monitoring ZA-Cube-2 images and data, they're also working on the commercialization of their nano-satellite program, after receiving a cash injection from the government of more than $1 million. It wants to use locally built nano-satellites to monitor illegal activities like poaching and overfishing along the coast.
The Department of Science and Technology has actually given us another contract to build 3 more of these satellites. There's some pirate ships, in the South African exclusive economic zone, and they would like to use this technology to see how many ships are here exactly.
The technology employed by the satellites, though, have broad applications, which can be used in various ways. They can also bring down barriers of entry many African countries face when taking on satellite programs.
We can provide also training to any other African country, and we can also provide assistance if it's required. The next step is to actually use the technology on a constellation of satellites, but that still needs to be determined.
So this point here is...
For now, all systems seem nominal aboard ZA-Cube-2 as it orbits 100 kilometers above the Earth. For the students, though, the work doesn't stop there, as the nanosatellite's next incarnation is already taking shape. The new satellites are expected to take to the skies in early 2021. But until then, a lot of work is going into aligning the science of the program with its commercial aspects, so that it can be sustainable in the future and open doors to other African countries wanting to pursue space science and technology. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's head into a quick break. Still to come. Saudi Arabia confirms drones have caused some damage to its oil pipelines. And the UK sees an increasing number of investment projects from China.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now here's a recap of today's headlines. Starting in Sudan, where tensions remain high after 4 people were killed in the capital, Khartoum. Now, State TV reported heavy gunfire in the capital late into Monday evening. The violence broke out after negotiators announced progress in a political transition deal. And the division in Libya is creating security concerns for migrants trying to cross the country's coastline to Europe. In the past week, 65 migrants drowned. And according to the UN, 871 migrants have been picked up and returned to detention centers in often unacceptable conditions since the Tripoli clashes began. And finally, Mali has called on the European Union to step up its support for the Sahel region. That's amid a spate of extremist attacks. The country's foreign minister called for action from Europe and other countries in the world that, of course, are concerned by the terrorist threat. And that's a recap of today's headlines. Well, let's head over to Saudi Arabia, where an oil pipeline has been attacked by drones, causing limited damage. In a TV report, Iranian-aligned Houthi rebels have claimed responsibility for the attack, citing vital Saudi facilities as the intended target. Well, state-owned oil company Saudi Aramco has in response ceased pumping to assess the damage and make repairs. The damaged pipelines run from the oil production areas in the eastern part of the country to the Red Sea, where the Saudis maintain export facilities. This incident follows another attack carried out on 2 Saudi oil tankers on Sunday. Although no oil spill or casualties were reported, it is still unclear who was behind that attack. Meanwhile, China has retaliated against the United States for expanding tariffs on Chinese goods. It says it plans to raise duties on tens of billions of dollars worth of imports from the U.S. Now, the stock market and soybean futures aren't the only sectors taking a hit in that trade war. And let's take a look at how the American economy is being affected, as well as how Washington has been harming itself with its own tariffs.
While Trump has touted that China will be the one to foot the bill in this trade war, many indicators point in the opposite direction. Banking giant Goldman Sachs says the damage has fallen entirely on the U.S., pointing to higher consumer prices. They say this is due to Chinese exporters refusing to drop their prices, a move Trump didn't count on happening. But the reality of the tariffs' impact on the U.S. is clear to many, including to Trump's own economic advisor, Larry Kudlow.
Both sides will pay. Both sides will pay in these things.
Trump's moves to alleviate the effects of his own tariffs domestically shows he may believe this as well. When Trump announced a new round of tariffs on Twitter, he also attempted to assure farmers this wouldn't impact their bottom lines. He says the U.S. will use the money earned from the tariffs to buy their goods and ship it to poor and starving countries as humanitarian aid. He's also announced a plan to subsidize farmers to the tune of $15 billion US. That's on top of the $12 billion he already gave to farmers last year. But despite this, Trump has been maintaining the tariffs have been benefiting the economy. This stance is only becoming increasingly perplexing, as one of the world's largest investment banks, Trump's own economic advisor, and even his own actions contradict his beliefs. Timothy Ulrich, CGTN.
Meanwhile, figures from an American research group show that China is still investing in big British infrastructure projects despite concerns over Brexit. Now, the Rhodium Group says its latest figures demonstrate that Chinese companies poured in more than $4.5 billion in 2018 into the country. However, as CGTN's Richard Bestick reports, China's interest in Britain isn't confined to buildings and business.
China's share in the massive $30 billion building cost of Britain's next-generation nuclear power stations remains an outstanding front-runner. Although Britain's welcome for Chinese investment stretches to everything from the manufacture of electric taxis here to a bid for a role in the country's 5G network. People also part of China's UK partnership. More than 95,000 university students and nearly 15,000 pupils at British private schools, according to the UK's Independent Schools Council. Numbers rising, and all with their own reasons.
People here are really friendly. I think the university in UK is more welcoming for the Chinese students.
I look forward to experience here, to living or studying in a different country.
The benefit of a growing number of Chinese students coming to colleges like the University of Birmingham here is a two-way street. The students benefit from an improvement in their English language skills and a more international approach to their subject.
The college also benefits millions financially and other ways too.
China has a great number of really outstanding students. So wherever talent is, we will recruit. But also, of course, our Chinese students add so much to us culturally and socially. So it's a real joy to have our Chinese students, and we always welcome them to campus.
Applications from Chinese students rose to record levels last year, according to Britain's Universities Admissions Service, a trend welcomed amid concerns in further education over Britain's Brexit future. Richard Bestick, CGTN, Birmingham, England.
Now, Vancouver is the only major Canadian city where ride-hailing has long been illegal. However, this has seen the emergence of several taxi-hailing apps despite strict regulations. And here's CGTN's Hendrik Seabrandy with more on that report.
Vancouver is a cosmopolitan city that offers residents and tourists seemingly everything under the sun, with a notable exception.
We call it ride sharing. Some people call it ride hailing.
Ian Tostenson leads a coalition working to incorporate ride sharing, hailing, or sourcing into a transportation system he says cries out for new ways of getting around.
I'm in the hospitality business. It's embarrassing for us to have a city like Vancouver, which is internationally recognized. We had the Olympics here, all these different things, and we're so far behind when it comes to ride sharing.
It's the only major Canadian city where ride hailing has long been illegal. Cabs are the standard here. Tostenson and others argue a powerful local taxi industry has helped keep companies like Uber and Lyft from providing Vancouverites with the mobility option they need.
Because there's a lack of taxis available in Vancouver, especially on rainy days, and it's just more accessible, and they're also cheaper.
Enter Cater, Vancouver's first legal hailing app and something of a hybrid. The company has been given 140 licenses by the local taxi association. Its vehicles, regulated like taxis, are matched with drivers who make a set wage. Cater's drivers don't own these cars. They're not responsible for maintenance or for insurance. They pick them up at the start of their shifts and return them at the end of the day.
We decided a scaled approach was a smart approach to launching new technology.
Cater's Corey Larson says as part of this beta test, 30 of the startup's cars are online right now. She predicts the concept will soon catch on.
We fully anticipate that there will be other competitors entering into the market.
In fact, a host of illegal underground ride-hailing apps are already said to be doing big business serving Vancouver's Chinese community. None of the companies we contacted responded to our requests for comment.
They probably won't pick you up if you're not Asian. They're not going to speak English, so they're very tightly controlled. It's another reason the government should move sooner to try to legitimize all this.
The province of British Columbia recently announced it will begin accepting applications for ride-hailing services this fall. Some residents who've heard stories about drivers harassing passengers wonder if this type of transport is safe.
I do think that there's a need for it, but if it was there was less drama around all of it, it would be wonderful too.
Pretty steady. Cater says safety is its top priority. Larson argues ride-hailing complements what Vancouver already offers.
To match all of those great things with options in mobility, that's the name of the game.
It's a game this city finally appears willing to play. Hendrik Sabrandi, CGTN, Vancouver.
Well, let's shift focus now and take a look at how commodities performed today. Oil prices still on the rise, with Brent crude up a further 1% on the day. That's after Saudi Arabia, as we mentioned earlier, revealed that explosive-laden drones had attacked 2 pumping stations. Of course, that's amid rising tension in the Gulf region, as well as rising tension between the U.S. and Iran. Meanwhile, gold prices holding steady near 1-month highs as an escalation in Sino-U.S. trade sent investors looking for safe haven assets. Well, let's head into a short break now. When we come back, we meet a young South African who's found a way to farm both fish and plants in a mutually beneficial cycle. And Egypt launches a nuclear technical school to assist the country's engineers.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
And heading to South Africa, a Pretoria-based teenager is running a successful aquaponics farm with expertise and foresight. Now, aquaponics is a system for farming fish and plants together in a mutually beneficial cycle. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela visited her farm and filed this report on Grassroots Tonight.
Closed aquaponics system has an advantage in dry areas because the water that is used is then recycled. And as the climate effects continue to be felt, interventions such as these are becoming a necessity. In 2014, when Rika-Liz Reineke was only 12 years old, she persuaded her father to let her attend a training course in aquaponics. This ultimately led to the establishment of this aquaponics farm near Roodeplaat in Pretoria.
Business purely just grew out of passion. I watched the movie Dolphin Tale, and from that a business developed, mainly an aquaculture farm, but due to the stocking densities that was too high in our aquaculture farm, we had to get a solution to clean the water and that's how the aquaponics part started. So I can basically say from a problem we had to get a solution, and the solution was an aquaponics farm, and that just grew and grew to a business today.
There are relatively few women in fish culture circles in South Africa, let alone teenagers. Reineke's farm has a number of tunnel systems, and both fish and plants are grown and sold. She breeds, amongst other things, a red strain of Mozambique's tilapia.
Currently we have tilapia, Orichrome mozambicus red strain, and then we also have shop-to catfish. Currently we have our own aquaponics shop. Now this shop sells all our own vegetables and fish. So mainly all our vegetables is sold from the shop.
The actual fish production is still relatively modest, as the main focus is on the plants, which use the fish waste as nutrients for growth. She tells us that she's still on a learning curve.
So even despite being a teenager, it's sometimes hard because you don't have, let's say, a lot of knowledge about a certain thing, but luckily I have people on my side that does have the knowledge, and I can just learn from them and involve with that.
On the day we visit Reineke, she was hosting a group of students from the United States Penn State University.
Wonderful projects that our Penn State students and American students get involved in real life issues, and they can see that what is really necessary, and they have to think really critically.
We're here to show our projects of water pollution and aquaponics farming, and we're here to kind of raise awareness as to how they can be used to improve various environmental situations in South Africa.
The demand for Reineke's products is so high, she intends on expanding. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Now, after signing the Russian nuclear electric plant agreement, Egypt is entering the nuclear club officially. The new nuclear technical school has been founded to infuse Egypt's first nuclear plant with, of course, the caliber of skill needed to assist its engineers. Well, CGTN had an exclusive access to the first of its kind nuclear school in the Arab world. Let's take a look.
Russia is building Egypt's first peaceful nuclear power plant in the Mediterranean city, El Daba. Some engineering and science faculties here have nuclear sciences specialties. And 2 kilometers away from the Daba nuclear plant location, the country's first nuclear technical school stands. Here, the Egyptian labor needed for this technology are being trained.
After announcing the registration for the school, we've received 1,800 students who fit the criteria. We only need 75. We've added an IQ test for the filtration process, and then some physical fitness and psychological checkups. That's all to ensure that we have the very best of the Egyptian students.
On an 8 acres of land with 9 buildings and 15 classes, this school is equipped with all necessities students need. From dorms to labs equipped with the technologies needed for their training, around $5 million have been invested in the Daba Advanced Technical School for Nuclear Power Technologies.
3 ministries have collaborated to establish this first-of-a-kind school in the Middle East: education, electricity and power, and military production. This is a peaceful nuclear plant. However, we need the expertise of the Military Production Ministry to install and manufacture hardware and labs needed.
This educational facility accepts middle school students who score over 95% in mathematics, science and English. The 5 years educational program has a capacity of 375 students. Daba's nuclear plant is expected to require 1,500 workers.
We want this school to become the influencer of caliber in future nuclear projects in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is already talking about establishing its first nuclear power plant. UAE is expected to follow. All such projects hopefully will depend on Egyptian labor.
The Daba nuclear power plant is a $25 billion project. It will include 4 electric generators with a total production of 4,800 megawatts. Egypt is currently studying to build a second nuclear power plant closer to its western border with Libya. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, Egypt's stock market has reduced its working hours by 2 hours daily to accommodate the Muslim month of Ramadan. However, the holy month is taking its toll on the North African nation as investors move to invest in the more profitable global markets. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with the details.
The first week of Ramadan has been tough for the stock market, with losses exceeding $2.5 billion.
There are external factors for this situation, mainly the trade war between China and the US, as Egypt is one of the markets affected by the instability. Internal factors relate to Ramadan, being a low season for Egyptian traders, but this is compounded by the fact that there is no clear vision going forward and some contradicting decisions, such as applying taxes instead of providing incentives. This has scared investors.
With the market at its low point, many local investors have moved to invest in the more profitable real estate and gold markets. Experts believe the government should act immediately to encourage investors to return to the stock market.
Taxes should be scrapped for it to become an attractive destination for traders again. This is a very important step. IPOs have been delayed, which has harmed the market. There are various successful public banks as well as companies in the oil and gas sectors. They should be floated to revitalize the stock market. It will bring investors back and raise the performance of the AGX.
A stamp tax imposed by the government in April was quickly withdrawn after a backlash from investors. Analysts believe the slowdown will continue throughout the month of Ramadan. The best form of investment at the moment is on the medium term. A turnaround could be expected once the new IPOs would be introduced in the stock market before the end of the year. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, before we go, here's a quick look at how Africa's currencies performed today. And of course, we saw South Africa's rand mostly flat on the day, struggling to bounce back from a flare-up in US-China trade tensions that, of course, had dragged the currency down a day earlier. Now, the trade dispute has snatched away some of the rand's gains, of course, after the ANC looked set for victory in parliamentary and provincial elections last week. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and of course, the rest of the team, thanks for watching.